But the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
You should not listen to men's rights advocates if you want to know what they have to say.
Coming to you live, Allison.
Oh, right. I have to do something. Shit.
You want coming to you live from deep within, a windy and like sort of 40-ish degrees northern Alberta environment of semi-discomfort.
What?
It's central Alberta, Brian. It's not northern Alberta. I'm not up in Fort McMurray. Jesus.
And also, I'm actually south of Karen. But
right.
That's right.
We're not close to the.
Well, none of
mountains.
this makes sense because we're all in different environments. So, coming to you live in the early fall.
Coming to you live in the early fall.
Where squash is now in season.
Remember it offhand.
And the pumpkin spice flows.
It must flow.
We are live, right?
Yes, we are.
Yeah, we are.
We are broadcasting. This is well, you know.
It's actually pretty entertaining.
If you show up in public with no pants, you just own it.
Yeah. Just,
there you go.
Just stride on by. Yeah. I have no pants, and I cannot lie.
You know, and I'm good with it.
Yeah, okay, let's see if I can remember this offhand. I'm sure that would be hilarious. Coming to you live from a radioactive wasteland. These are the survivors of the alt-right kek-apocalypse, zombie kek-apocalypse. The few, the brave, the bitchy.
To blade, which means to bluff.
Marriage! Marriage is what brings us together.
Today. Anyway, wading once again into the lobster froggy zombie hordes.
Lobster froggy hordes.
Right.
None of us are even drunk at this point, but I plan to.
This is Rantzerker. Rantzerker number
128.
128.
Feminist Laura Bates, Brainwash-blocked by teen boys. Or that's the title that I went with. So
okay, great. I wonder if anybody understands it.
We'll get into it. We'll figure it out. I'm surprised that there's anyone even still here after that catastrophe of an intro.
You should have called it clit blocked.
Clit blocked? No, because the thing was, well, maybe I should have. Sorry, my cats are engaging in some shenanigans. If you heard a crash in the background there.
I heard something.
Clit block. But what's happening is she apparently is upset that boys are talking back about things like rape and sexual assault, and they're actually asking questions because,
they're challenging things.
Asking questions is a sign of somebody who's been brainwashed by a cult.
Yes. Challenging ideas means you must be brainwashed.
Exactly. So, the reason why I called it brainwash blocking is because they have blocked her brainwashing.
Yes.
Which I just found that really funny because she's saying, well, they're learning to hate women on the internet. But the example she gives doesn't suggest that they're learning to hate women. They're just learning to defend themselves against her hatred of them.
Yeah,
or her
against
blaming.
Feminists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just, I don't know. Let's get into it now that we've now that we've attempted to do an intro. Thank you for your guys' help. I apologize for being really off my game today. I've completely forgot that I even had to say anything. I even yelled at my cat when she asked me to go out for the 4th time.
Oh, well, I stepped on my dog's leg the other day and then I yelled at him.
Aww.
He probably
he came, I was walking out of the front hall and he came barreling around just as I was coming past the wall, barreling around the corner and just stuck his freaking leg underneath my foot as it was coming down. And then he starts yelping and I was like, "What the fuck are you doing, you moron?" And then he just sat there and looked ashamed for a while.
Yeah, well, my cat didn't really look ashamed. She just wandered off.
Well, that's what cats do, because they don't actually experience love.
All right, thanks. She's back here now. She's actually at...
Yeah, because you got something she wants, right? So.
Yeah, attention, apparently.
There you go. See?
Yeah.
True.
They absorb love. They just don't feel love. Cats are like, so.
They feel nothing.
I suspect that you might be biased against cats.
Whereas a dog, you can abuse the shit out of them and they'll still be like super happy to see you when you come home.
Yeah.
I don't know if I want somebody or an animal like that. Okay, you know
I don't
what?
abuse my dog. I'm just going to put it out there. I don't abuse my dog.
You come up here, you want pets, and then you growl at me.
That's because she's a cat.
No, I think she's growling at the other cat who is angling to come up as well. They have a little bit of a competition going.
Oh, God. Well, this is like my one dog that tries to eat my other dog's head all the time. Yeah.
Yeah.
People, let me tell you about my best friend. The song goes through my head every time they start going at each other.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay, all right, let's do this thing.
All right. Okay. So I guess a little bit of setup. We were going to talk about Laura Bates's book, which I have the Amazon, I guess you could, what do you even call it? The Amazon page, so that if somebody wanted to buy it. Yeah, the blurb where you would buy the book. Apparently, though, it's only available for pre-order. The book isn't out yet. Laura Bates is apparently an author, and I'm thinking a feminist. I'm just spitballing, but that's just a guess.
Laura Bates is absolutely a feminist. I think she got Gormless Feminist of the Month from Mike Buchanan one time.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I feel like I've heard that name before.
Yeah, I think she was big on the pink tax and all kinds of. She wrote a book about how the world is everything from the height of seats on the subway to the amount of legroom in cars is all designed for men. Oh my God!
So she's a professional feminist. Like it's all about like writing about what's the latest depression. Yeah. You know what? I kind of miss them.
She's about as famous as Lori Penny.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Yeah.
But you kind of miss them because it's sort of a non-complicated relationship.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Like overall relationship with 2020.
Exactly. They're just kind of loony and you can laugh. And
con artisty.
Yes. Well, obviously. Yeah. What's funny about this is because, Alison, you asked me to maybe get the book or get the audiobook or the Kindle or something, and then we go through it. And so I clicked on the link you sent me to the Amazon listing for her book, and I saw that it wasn't available, but there was a review. And it was a 5-star review. How is there a review for a book that's not out yet that's a 5-star review?
No, it's essentially like you get an advance copy if you're a reviewer. So you get an advance copy and you get a sneak peek. You get the book maybe a month before it actually is released. That's pretty much standard operating procedure with books that come out in hardback or trade paperback that are sort of
right. So this is basically a reviewer, not just a person.
Well, I don't know that, but it could be. It could also just be a person who's like, I've read every stupid thing she's ever written, and it really resonated with me, so I'm just going to give a preview review, right? Because that could just be it could just be a fan,
Why is it coming out in hardback? This is my question.
Well, any kind of important nonfiction book comes out in hardback, Alison.
How is this? I has a frustration.
Okay, literally, Jenna Jameson's "How to Have Sex Like a Porn Star" came out in hardback. Okay,
I bet it came out hard.
So, yeah. And on the back.
Yeah, and on the back.
Hardback and bareback. There you go.
I was just boggling at this because it.
And in the back door,
a Kindle version. Nor could anybody pirate it. And I guess that explains it. It's not out yet.
Speaking of pirating, and well, not necessarily pirating, but about stealing. Okay, there's this new book out called.
Yeah, we already stole that one.
In Defense of Looting. Okay.
You should probably loot it.
Don't steal it.
Why?
Don't steal it, because if the bookstore does not have the book to return to the publisher, the book that was unsold to return to the publisher, then the publisher and the author get their money, right? So if you steal the book, right, the bookstore eats the cost of that. The publisher and the author still get paid. And it actually, especially if the book is in demand, then they might have to do a whole nother print run to replenish the bookstores with copies of the book, which means that the author earns out her advance sooner, which means she starts collecting royalties in addition to her advance sooner than that. So it's nothing but profit for her, whether you buy the book or whether you steal the book, right? So you're not hurting the author, you're not hurting the publisher, you are hurting the bookstore. And maybe you don't like the bookstore because they decided to carry a stupid book like that, and you're willing to say, okay, I'll put money in the author and publisher's pocket just to stick it to the bookstore. And you can't, if it's hardback, you can't rip the cover off, right, and leave it on the shelf. You can't do things like that because, or rip the cover off and send it back to the publisher yourself for a refund. You can't do things like that because that's not how hardback works, or trade paperback. So essentially, if you steal the book, the only business that you're hurting is the store that is selling the book. Oh, and you're also probably enriching Jeff Bezos, because then people who can't find the book in brick and mortar stores are going to order it off of Amazon. And it's next to impossible to shoplift off of Amazon. And Amazon is actually a really, really, really dirty player in the publishing industry. And they deserve to die. So even though I shop there, but I'm just saying.
I'm starting to shop a little less there, considering we've experienced some fraud through Amazon, which was extremely stressful. But the other thing I wanted to say is I did not loot or steal this book. I pirated it.
That's different.
There you go. And so nobody gets paid.
Nobody gets paid.
Which is
nobody
great.
Gets paid. But unfortunately, it looks like this one, somebody's going to have to pay her for it, either the audio version or the.
Well, you'll be able to get the Kindle version. Once the Kindle version is actually available, someone will download it and then upload it to 130,000 of their closest friends on some pirate site. It will become available. It's just the book hasn't been released yet. So that's the thing, right?
Yeah. So maybe when that happens, we can go through the book itself.
Not that anybody's recommending pirating.
No, we're all against
not
that.
At all.
That's bad.
Not at all.
It's bad. So for people who are listening and listening to this as a podcast and not watching this on YouTube, the book we're talking about by Laura Bates is entitled "Men Who Hate Women: From Incels to Pickup Artists, The Truth About Extreme Misogyny and How It Affects Us All." Extreme, not regular misogyny, not mild misogyny. Extreme, like Monster energy drink, like Mountain Dew, like off the snowboarding in the Alps, with a parachute misogyny.
Base jumping,
yes.
Jumping, off the Empire State Building, extreme. We're doing parkour 60 floors up with no safety net.
Misogyny.
That's how extreme we are.
In the misogyny, yes. Mm-hmm. Extreme.
As if we weren't cool enough. We are extreme.
Extreme. Like, I literally jumped out of an airplane, and then I told my partner who had the parachute to count to 30 before he jumped out of the airplane, and then like maneuvered so that he could grab me and clip me on, and then he could pull the chute, and that kind of extreme. That's pretty extreme.
Yeah.
That's extreme.
That's high risk.
Without a parachute, friends.
If I'm wearing a parachute, it just doesn't feel extreme enough.
Mm-hmm. Yep. This is Red Bull misogyny. So, but we couldn't go through the book. So instead we have this article that I think exists to promote the book. Pretty sure.
I would get, you know how they always have,
yeah, like, I got a new book coming out.
Make an extreme, they'll make an extreme statement on Twitter or somewhere. And then the last line will be, read more in my book. It's like the new donate to my Patreon. Yeah.
Yeah, kinda. That really is what it like. And I think half of the people who have bought In Defense of Looting are just morbidly curious. And I think that,
or they online looted
it. Yeah. But I mean, like when I keep thinking, like, how come not every radio show host or, book reviewer can be like that guy who caught, what's her name? Naomi Wolf in that massive
thesis destroying lie or mistake.
Error. It was an error. It was a massive thesis destroying error. I wonder if her PhD has been revoked, because that was her PhD thesis as well.
Ouch! That's some extreme.
The books were all sitting in boxes in bookstores, ready to go on the shelves, and they were recalled and pulped.
I doubt it's actually affected her career at all. Oh, and by the way, guys, if you're listening,
I haven't heard word one from her since then.
Of course not.
Maybe not. Maybe it has affected
her head down, and maybe nobody's.
She'll pop up in 10 years.
It'll be a while.
I wanted to tell the people listening that we will be covering as much as we can of In Defense of Looting with Teal Deer this Friday.
Woohoo!
That's a good idea. I won't be there because that's when the guys come in to hook up my fiber optic internet.
Oh, yeah. There you go.
So, yeah.
That's going to be quite the upgrade. I would love to have fiber optic internet, but it'd probably cost $50,000 here. Okay, let's do this.
All right.
Let's everybody grab your snowboards and your rollerblades, because we're about to do some extreme misogyny. What?
Some extreme misogyny. Speaking of extreme misogyny, if you'd like to make sure that extreme misogyny remains in the world, please go available to you
for your enjoyment, and also the repelling of feminists who want to explain to you how deeply horrible you are as a man. Please go to feedthebadger.com/project/badger-media-blitz, because we are starting again the monthly fundraiser. I know you guys all came together and helped us get Brian out and Lindsay out of Chicago, and we successfully did that. We even did a little bit above, so that was great. But of course, we still have to do the monthly fundraiser every month. So feedthebadger.com/project/badger-media-blitz, and put a few shekels in the hat to fund Brian, Hannah, and potentially either Prim or Dr. Rantzerker. So maybe I'll like take my wine boxes in for the deposit into the bottle depot, and then I'll have like at least $600-700
to
throw in the hat. I'm exaggerating.
Oh, okay.
But
I just thought they're paying a lot for bottles. Not you have a lot of bottles.
25 cents per box.
That's very polite there, Brian.
But they flatten really easily, and so they're easy to store, and they don't leak, and they don't attract fruit flies, and so it's like we deal with all of the other things first, and so they sort of stack up. It's like been a year and a half or something like that since I took them in.
That'd be great if you wanted to put some shekels in the hat, and if anybody else has wine boxes or bottles or cans, you could also do that as well.
Yeah, just send them to Alison.
No, don't please, no.
That's what it sounds like. All right. So let's do the article. All right, so the article, which is just so happens to be selling the book, is entitled "The New Cult of Militant Misogyny Poisoning Minds." Laura Bates discovers in a truly shocking expose that teen boys are being brainwashed online to violently hate women. Dun, 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 dun. Wait, actually, I got a sound effect for that.
I wonder if we're in on that.
Dun, dun, dun. Yes, I think we are. And this really reminds me of this time I was in a Boston Pizza somewhere in the city in which I live. And I was there with Nick Redding and the guy, Steve, who was hosting one of the Red Pill movie screenings in the city. He was hosting it at I think it was at NATE, Northern Alberta Institute of Technology, because he taught there. And my husband, so it's the four of us sitting at the table, and we were all talking, and the 18-year-old, maybe, fresh-faced waiter comes up and sort of overhears us, and he was like, "Oh, so what are you doing?" And we're arranging a screening of a movie, blah blah blah, about men's rights and feminism. And he's like, "Oh yeah, oh that sounds cool." And I'm like, "Well, what do you know about, like, okay, give me some on the wage gap." And he's like, "Isn't that just an apples to oranges comparison of every man and woman who works more than 35 hours a week? Like, isn't that a totally bogus statistics, right?" And I'm like, "You're 18 and you already know this. I love you, young man." We gave him a big tip. Thus increasing the wage gap.
Yes, that was some extreme misogyny you were engaging in right there by giving him a tip. Totally tubular. All right, so the article.
Okay.
Oh God, it's written by Laura Bates. So, why should I believe you? I blinked in surprise. I don't know why I can barely see. The Daily Mail really needs to do something about the way they format their text, because you literally lose, like, the margins vanish on the left side. So I'm kind of guessing at what the first words here are. All right, I blinked in surprise.
Point something out.
Yeah.
All right, I know that this is like 2 sentences in, but this already reads like some sort of neuro-linguistic programming, erotic 50 Shades of Grey shit. Yeah. It just reads like fiction.
Yeah, it does. Of course. Hackles
and
up.
I'm guessing that what the kid actually said was probably even milder. Like maybe something like, do you have any evidence? Or
no, I think it's perfectly believable to believe for a kid, to a teenage boy, to say, "Why should I believe you?"
Yeah, I guess you're right, but politely. Like she describes him as being polite. Sorry, keep going, Brian.
Yeah, no, I think it would be polite. Like, this is some kind of, like, if my son was engaged in some kind of mandatory workshop on learning how horrible he is because he's male, I think he'd put his hand up and ask a question like that politely.
Yeah, I could see that.
Okay, well,
of course it's not polite.
Going.
That's extreme misogyny.
Extreme.
Okay. The teenage boy looked back at me, polite interest on his face. In the course of delivering a school session about gender equality, sexual violence, and consent, I just discussed my own experience of being sexually assaulted on a bus. His immediate response was to ask if I was lying. It hasn't always been like that. Yeah, no, it's not an accusation.
That's not his immediate response. Why are you lying about him?
Yeah, no, that's the thing, right? Like, why should I believe you is not you're lying. It's asking for evidence
or verification, or even to explain. But the other thing is
verify or whatever, right?
Why is this adult talking about sexual experiences to a bunch of minors?
Yeah, like, that's kind of a little bit.
It's a kind of creepy there, Laura Bates.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty, like, I don't think that health teachers do this. That they're more clinical. They're not talking about their own. I mean, could you imagine, like a male PE teacher or a health teacher being like, yeah, and let me tell you about my personal sexual experiences. No, that would be immediate firing, no pass go, possible
right. And
lawsuit.
Kids, I'm not circumcised, so it's like needless details, right?
Yeah, exactly. So why
also a manscape? Because that's just considerate.
Okay.
Yeah. But I get razor bumps on my balls, and it kind of sucks. Makes them really itchy when the hair start growing back in. You know what I'm saying, guys? You know what I'm saying.
That's why waxing is preferable, even though it hurts.
You get it. You guys get it. It's like, why did this become acceptable behavior for this woman to go in among minors and start talking about sexual experiences that she's had?
Yeah.
Even if they're non-consensual, this is totally inappropriate and it's gross. Laura Bates, you are sexualizing minors. And they may not be intentional, but when you do this, you are presenting a sexual experience to minors that they no doubt can't consent to. I doubt there's I don't want to actually have Laura Bates tell me about her sexual experiences consent form involved here. Pretty sure that this is something that they're just obligated to listen to. And so you have a captive audience of young men, and you're sitting there. No wonder she has that sort of gruesome little smile on her face. You're just sitting there, with this captive audience of young boys, telling them about these gross sexual experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Like, is there a possibility that there are some ulterior motives behind her behavior?
like you mean she's getting herself a wet ass pussy?
Yeah, like she might need to. She might be able to glide into the room sometimes.
She might have to get out the mop.
Yeah.
Okay, we're devolving into
Cardi B territory.
Where I'm happy to go there, but
all right, so all right, I'll keep reading.
What the hell was that?
That's a Cardi B thing.
Yeah,
she did it for Joe. She did it with Joe Biden.
Therefore, yeah, it's just political rhetoric, Alison. All right, the teenage boy looked back at me, polite interest on his face. In the course of delivering a school session about gender equality, sexual violence, and consent, I had just discussed my own experience of being sexually assaulted on a bus. His immediate response was to ask if I was lying. It hasn't always been like this. I started working in schools 8 years ago, after creating the Everyday Sexism Project, a website which cataloged thousands of experiences of harassment, assault, and abuse.
See, that's why she won the Lying Feminist Award and the Gormless Feminist Award.
For the Everyday Sexism Project.
Yes.
Yeah, that sounds abusive. After I realized just how many of the stories came from young people, it became clear that we needed to have conversations about these things in schools, something that largely wasn't happening at the time. So
that statistically teenage girls are quite sexually aggressive.
Yeah, and they,
sexually abusive, and they do not understand consent in some cases. I mean, there's a good portion of them that have no concept that they actually need to get consent from the people they target.
Boys are generally about 2 years behind them in their intellectual, psychological, and sexual development by that point. So essentially, when you could argue that when a 16-year-old girl pressures a 16-year-old boy into bed, she is the one who's taking advantage of the more innocent party who is less able to make judgments about things.
Mm-hmm. Because based on mental maturity. So yes. I wonder if any of that is in her lecture. I mean, she looks at her cherry-picked sample from Everyday Sexism, which I remember, and I remember being sort of just annoyed. I just sighed at it. And then she cherry-picks from that, which I doubt has a lot of male or men or boys participating in. and she says, well, obviously teen boys need a talking to. Based on that, well, why didn't you look at the statistics?
Yeah.
And say to yourself, well, maybe teen girls need a talking to. Maybe teen girls needed more of a talking to than teen boys.
Or at least as much.
Yeah, at a certain point, I think teen girls eclipse teen boys in terms of sexual assault, engaging or inflicting it on other people.
Yeah.
So, that actually would be a discussion that should be had. But anyway, is this a side topic? Are you going to make that noise again? Because it was horrendous and confusing to me.
Is that a good way to get you to, rein it in? Because I'll use it.
Oh, yeah. No, I'll use it, too.
Yeah, because I'm the one who's...
I just... Now, this is totally as an aside, but Lindsay cannot roll her R's at all. She doesn't even know how to begin. Can you guys roll your R? Yeah, I mean, it sounds like Karen can do it, but... Alison, can you roll your R's? Can you do that? Can you do that? That sounds like you're gargling. I don't think that's... Is that rolling your R? I don't know if you're rolling your R.
Let me see.
No, you should be rolling your R with the tip of your tongue, not the back of your tongue.
Let me see. Rage, Doge. Rage.
Rage, Doge.
Rage, Doge. Rage.
The American and R, right, is mostly with the back of your tongue, and the Spanish rolling of the R is generally with the tip of your tongue on your hard palate.
It's kind of like what... Yeah, it's almost like the way that you make the...
on your soft palate.
Yeah, it's kind of similar to when you make a D sound.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're just rolling it. Well, I don't know. It's
you're holding it in a certain position, sort of just up against your hard palate, behind your teeth, behind your front teeth, and you're pushing air over it to make it flap.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't even think I can do that.
Okay. All right.
You just sound like Homer Simpson when he sees a donut.
Okay, all right. I just want to know where we're starting from here.
Okay, we're starting from the point where we left off.
Yeah, I'm gonna go back to the article now. Yes. We've established that Alison has no seasoning. So let me see.
No sense of humor?
No no, I said no seasoning. Like you don't have any Latina in you.
You're not spicy.
Yeah.
You're not spicy.
You cannot roll your R's. By the way, Cardi B, not black. Okay. Anyway.
And also Cardi B, if you watched her in the interview with Joe Biden at the DNC, Alison, you have to watch this, right? After we get off the radio, because she has these fake 3-inch swords poking out of the ends of her fingers. And I was and she's gesturing, she's talking like an Italian, right? Okay, she's waving her hands, and I keep expecting her to frickin' impale herself, and she never does. How do women manage to do that?
I guess they're conscious of what their fingers are doing.
Well,
yeah, they must.
It's not her fingers; it's her fingers plus 3 inches.
Yeah, it's her nails.
The 3 inches are controlled by the finger, unless we're talking about some sort of Wolverine thing.
All I know is when my mom used to say to me, "Well, we're getting them 2 sizes bigger so that you'll grow into them," I was constantly tripping over my fucking shoes.
Why are you asking me this question? Have you ever seen me with 3-inch nails on my head?
I'm just saying. Go look at it, because the grotesqueness of the image is well worth suppressing your gag reflex and having to apply bleach to your eyes.
So you're telling me that I'm going to be in pain as a result of looking at this image?
Yeah, it's like watching the Babadook.
Oh, God. Okay. Anyway.
Okay, well, you've definitely sold it.
Yeah.
Back to the article. After I realized, I already read that one. So I visited hundreds of schools, giving young people an opportunity to discuss their own experiences, gender roles, sexism, and more. Sounds like child abuse. Naturally, the responses to me and the debates I was initiating were very mixed. There was awkwardness and confusion, resistance and embarrassment. There were nervous giggles and a few outrageous comments. At a West Midland school, the boys plotted in advance and wolf whistled in unison as I walked out onto the assembly hall stage.
Good on them.
But underneath the usual prickly teenage surface, young people were usually willing to talk and to share experiences. Yet, in the past 2 years, that has all changed. I have started to experience fierce and angry resistance. Teenage boys arrived at my sessions prepared with hate-fueled arguments about lying women and false rape accusations. They didn't want to talk. They weren't prepared to listen. They already knew that feminazis are out to destroy men. Where is the lie?
That's
a good point. Yes.
Okay,
where is the lie?
I'm scheduled to go on some radio show. I think it's Keith Hansen or something, in frickin' Vermont or something like that next week, to talk about a Vice article on a study that was done that shows that Generation Z or Z males, the majority of them think that feminism has gone too far. Okay, and I'm reading this article, and they're interviewing the authors of the study and all of this, right? And at no point whatsoever does the author of the article or any of the people that they interviewed who authored the study or were commenting on the study, at no point do they ever actually do any self-examination. Do they ever actually look at it and think for even 1 second, is it possible that these boys are actually right? Is it possible that we may have taken things a bit too far? Right? No, they are literally saying, and this means we need to step up our efforts to indoctrinate these boys. We need to start earlier in school, and we need to keep it up, and we need to, because it couldn't possibly be us. It must be these boys.
Yep. No self-reflection whatsoever.
I was just like, I was blown away. And I'm thinking, like, this is what this is, right? Like, these boys, they know that they've been lied to. You know why? Because they found someone like Sargon, or they found someone like me, or they found someone like even Ben Shapiro, or Glenn Beck, or Tucker Carlson, or any number of people who actually kind of pulls the curtain back and says, actually, kind of, this is Thomas Sowell. Thomas Sowell disproved the wage gap, the gender wage gap, in 1989. In 1989, he had data saying, you know what this is? This is really a difference in wages between women who have been married and have children and everybody else. Because the women who were never married and have no children, they earn more than the men.
Yep. So all you have to do to earn more than men is not get married.
And not have children.
And not stop your job.
Yeah.
To take care of kids.
And when you compare them to when you compare never married women with no kids to never married men with no kids, the women tend to earn more, and that's probably because the men don't feel pressure to compensate for a wife they don't have and kids they don't have.
Probably either, to be honest, in a lot of cases now.
Yeah.
Yeah, they don't think to ask the thing is that she says she asks for their stories, but does she really? That's my question. Does she really ask for the stories of young men? Because she never seems to talk about them. Unless they affirm her particular point of view.
Or refuse to affirm it, and then she complains about them in an article. On the Telegraph? Or
yeah. Okay, Brian, let's read some more. Be careful with the typing because it's a little distracting.
Yeah, you're clackety-clacking all over the place.
Oh, I thought that my...
Clackety clack clack clack. Yeah, you weren't muted.
For once, that wasn't my dog's toenails.
No, I thought
it was Brian twittering, probably.
All right. Okay.
Pay attention.
Really?
He's multitasking.
Let me just see where I left off. Oh, right, here we go. They didn't want to talk. They weren't prepared to listen. They already knew that feminazis were out to destroy men. Men, especially white ones, they said, were the real victims in society. Another classic lie. I promise you they didn't say that.
Oh my
God. They never say that. The idea that someone is having problems or they're acknowledging that they can be victimized by people it's not them playing the same game that feminists are playing. It's
this is all projection, right? Because what feminists want you to believe is that women are the real victims, the only victims, the true victims. Okay, and so when you say men and boys can also be victims, can sometimes be victims, can be equally victims, right? Then you are literally saying, in their minds, what they're saying. Men are the real victims, the only victims, the true victims. Right?
I mean, white men in particular.
It's
even more indefensible, right?
But the only thing that I can see, and I can see somebody bringing up white men in particular, is because there's no advocacy group for white men. There's no advocacy group for whites, and there's there is an advocacy group for men, but we're just a bunch of freaking extreme misogynists who get written up in the SPLC.
Doing our misogyny parkour and misogyny without a parachute. But just to add to that, the sort of egregious approach to this that they point out, especially white men. Well, white men are especially victims of things like suicide. So in that case, yes. But in general, all men share the same vulnerabilities in society and a lot of the same issues. So the people who talk about this genuinely, I don't think that they are saying that we need to focus on white men exclusively, unless they are statistically suffering more from something like being blamed for everything and committing suicide more. But I personally, say I advocate for all men, regardless even of belief, like feminist men and even communist men, it doesn't matter what you believe. I think that I'm not necessarily going to agree with you, but I still think that you should be valued as a man. I think women's value is pretty much innate, so there's not much we can do to take it away. But, men should be valued just because they're men. It doesn't mean that they can't earn more through their actions, but I think that they should be valued. That means I don't make these artificial distinctions between men, aside from situations where you might want to target a particular group of men because they have particular issues due to the group that they belong to, in addition to being male.
Agreed. Right.
Yeah.
It's like intersectionality in terms of its theory, it actually does make sense, right? Because if you were a white man, there's certain.
Oh, Karen's breaking up on us.
Oh,
Karen,
goodness!
Lost.
Maybe send her a text. Ticky tack.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now. Can you hear us? Okay, are we robotic to you?
Yes.
All right. Go ahead. Intersectionality.
You do have a disparity between blacks and whites, right? The 10% disparity in sentencing between blacks and whites, right? And a 60% disparity between men and women. And so the black men kind of get the shit end of the stick on that one, a little bit more, right? But there are people out there, I don't know if anybody noticed, advocating for black men and their interactions with the criminal justice system.
They're using that.
I know they are. I
don't think they genuinely, because if you actually look at the Black Lives Matters rhetoric.
I know. Absolutely, I know.
They're intersectional.
Feminist Marxism.
It's just communism. right?
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, right, the idea that, you can exist in multiple categories, and that will actually impact how you're treated in a given situation. So, but nobody's blaming black men for everything that's ever happened bad over the last 1,000 years. No, those are white men. White men are being blamed for that. And it's not white women. It's not white women either.
It's not. No, it's white men.
Well, to a degree, it's starting to be, because they're starting to call out white feminism.
Oh, yeah.
Speaking
Karens.
of that,
Karens,
unfortunately named Karens. But
I love it. I love the meme.
Speaking of that, I was in a conversation or not a conversation. I was talking to a feminist on Twitter, and we were talking about, of course.
Yeah, that's not a conversation. So.
Yeah, it's something, but it's not a conversation. Yeah, I accept your correction.
There you go.
We were talking about the franchise, the vote, right? It's the typical conversation that feminists have. Oh, women didn't get the vote till blah, blah, blah. And it's like, I told them, well, every group of men who has wanted to have the vote has had to go to war first, even including the very first group of men who was enfranchised to have a say in the government. They were the men who were expected to go out and die for their societies. Like, this was aristocratic men. It's why they lived like 30, 40 years, because they were always dying. Yeah. And so they were the first group of men. They had to go to war. And yes, subsequent to them getting the landowners, getting the franchise, and the franchise, landowning, say in the government, and military service have been bound together since Rome, like the Roman Republic. Only land-owning Romans could become soldiers during the Republic. That changed over time, and only they had a say in politics. So this has been a standard throughout all of human history. There's this tie between landowning, soldiering, and a say in government. When it came to the modern era, and we started to challenge that, the men who had been enfranchised because they had always been fighting for their societies resisted other groups of men, allowing other groups of men to be franchised. So poor men, Asian men, black men, men of other tribes. They didn't want them, and they didn't want them to go to war because they knew it would open up the question of full citizenship rights. Yeah. So they stopped that. But these men eventually managed, black men in particular, is the ones we were talking about, they managed to convince the previous, the men in charge and the men in power, to allow them to go to war. And they went to war, they fought and died for their country, and then, only then, could they ask for full citizenship. Yeah. So this is what black men had to do. They had to first convince the white men, or the white men in charge, because it wasn't poor men, white men, that they would be allowed to fight and die for their country. And then they had an argument for full citizenship. That's how it worked. And that's how it has worked for every group of men, including the first group of men who got the vote. They had to fight and die, and then they were considered for a say in the running of society. Now, this particular feminist on Twitter told me that white women were worse off than black men because black men got the vote first. Yeah. Yeah. Of course. Now, this is what I'm getting to, the point where this intersects with what Laura Bates says. She saw a situation in which black men had to fight and die. First had to convince the ruling body to allow them to fight and die. They had to fight and die for their country. And then they had an argument to ask for full citizenship rights. So she's looking at a situation where there's a black veteran ahead of a white woman in line, and that man only got in line, or was only allowed in line, because he fought and he sacrificed to be there. And she's there. She has not had to fight or sacrifice to be there. And they usually say something like, women were excluded. So were black men. I know. And black men, without the same political clout that white women had to create things like prohibition, black men managed to convince the people, the men in charge, that they should be allowed to serve their country. But somehow, white women with all of their political power, even prior to having the vote, could not convince men of that. Yet other groups that had been excluded from combat were able to convince them, then get to the point where they could ask for full citizenship. But not women. But because white women were behind groups of men who had to fight and die to even be in the line, this white feminist is saying that white women were more oppressed than black men or minority men or poor men.
Of course.
And I can't freaking believe that Laura Bates is accusing us of focusing on white people or white men to the exclusion of the issues of other men. When this is what feminists do, the entire story of the franchise. When do you ever really hear that actually white women sort of got the vote for free? And if you look at the situation for any other group of men, poor men, minority men, even the original men, they had to fight and die for it. Yeah. So franchise, when you talk about franchise,
not fight against their government, but fight for it.
They had to fight for their government. They had to prove they were willing to sacrifice for the country that they wanted to have full citizenship rights with. And then feminists look back in history and claim that as female oppression.
Yeah.
It is absolute. That is whitewashing history.
Oh, yeah.
In favor of white female victimhood. Well, and then Laura Bates has the audacity to turn around and say that we're playing like the white supremacy game. No, feminism is. Feminism's entire argument about the franchise oppressing women is white feminism. It's peak white feminism.
Yeah. Peak upper class white feminism. You know, and this is kind of like that. You remember that, what was it? Democracy Now! Chick.
Oh.
You know, who came to that conference.
It was
in London.
50 Democracy Now! And in the UK. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and she stood there and like shoved the microphone in your face, and I was literally back up against the wall. And my back's against the wall, and she is literally 6 inches away from me, like standing in front of me, shoving the recorder in my face. Anyway, well, the one thing that she cut out of because she selectively edited the recording of the interview, the one thing I believe she cut out was when I said, because she said, well, but what about women? You know, men were required to be soldiers, and women were required to produce soldiers. And I'm like, when has there ever been a pregnancy draft? When has there ever been a government mandate, right, recruiting women, you know, to get impregnated and give birth to babies? Or, you know, if you didn't want to do it, you could go to prison or maybe get run up a gibbet.
Mm-hmm.
Like, when has that ever happened? When has that, like, we have that fictional story, The Handmaid's Tale. Okay, we have that. Ooh, a dystopian future. Yeah, well, you know what? Every single man has lived that in the United States since its inception. It's called the draft, selective service, conscription, right? You can be scooped out of your life and ordered to, you know, gun in your hands, ordered to go and do something against your will with your body, including allowing it to be killed, and you just don't have any say. So you can't compare this duty of women to replenish the supply of soldiers through their, you know, their God-given wombs. You can't even draw a comparison. Like, we didn't even force them to do mandatory war work.
Nope. Women have never been expected to sacrifice for the countries that they have demanded full citizenship privileges from.
Yeah.
They've never been. Like, maybe you can't even make the argument with nurses now. Like, it's never been obligated.
Well, a nurse can quit at any moment.
Yeah, right? It's never something that's been obligated.
They were kicking around the idea in the Korean War the U.S. government was kicking around the idea of a nurse draft, right? And they ultimately decided against it. They did a doctor draft. So male doctors were drafted because they did not have the medical personnel that they needed. So male doctors were drafted. Female nurses were recruited, right? So they had a big recruitment campaign, and they managed to get enough of them to make do, who were willing to step, and kudos to them. They were willing to step up and answer the call, right? But I mean, it was a major debate. It was a major bone of contention, like, do we or don't we? Like, this is something like we've never considered before, ever, drafting women, ever.
Yep.
So there you go. And they ended up not doing it.
And even more so, all of this ends up being an argument where the woman is using white female victimhood as a weapon. And feminists do this constantly. They distort history in such a way that they are actually minimizing the situation, what Black men had to deal with.
Oh, yeah.
Or any minority men. And also the men who even had the vote before everybody else. They minimize everything in order to maintain their narrative. And the way that she said this particular feminist on Twitter, the way that she said how, Black men got the vote for white women, the way that she said it was so contemptuous.
Yeah.
And so blind to reality. It's just like, it's like looking at a white suffragette, a white elite woman, suffragette, all done up, all gussied up like a rich woman she was, just fuming and disgusted at the thought that she has to stand behind a Black man veteran, a veteran of a war who probably has been, injured, watched his comrades die in front of his eyes. And even so, even having gone through all of that, this Black man only thinks he has the right to ask for citizenship privileges, not demand them like her, not hold the government hostage like a rich, entitled white feminist she is.
Not engage in domestic terrorism. He
expected. He even, for the groups of men who went through this process, they believed that this was the way to become a full citizen. First, you sacrifice for your country to prove you have the mettle to be a full citizen. That's how they saw it. That's how these minorities and poor men saw it. And then you get to ask. Then you get to say, I have sacrificed. Can I be considered for the honor of citizenship? And compare that to the white, elite, rich suffragette who stamps her feet, engages in acts of terrorism and attempted murder, and thinks she's entitled.
And then complains that when she goes on a hunger strike in prison because the judge won't declare her a political prisoner, which would essentially... she would be qualified for asylum in another country. Since he won't do that, then she stamps her feet and complains that she's being force-fed, just like every other freaking prisoner at the time who ever went on a hunger strike.
Yeah.
How dare they treat me like they treat everyone?
And then to continue this is what's so galling. To continue to say, well, I had to stand behind a Black veteran, a Black man in line, therefore I was the most oppressed in history. For feminists to continue to say that.
Or a poor man, and it's like the Chartists, right? A lot of the Chartist leaders, they were executed or died in prison or were exiled to Tasmania, right? That's how they were treated. And then these suffragettes, right? They actually built a special wing of the prison for them because they were all well-to-do, well-heeled ladies, delicate flowers, that had hot and cold running water, right? And they have the gall to say that they were subjected to inhuman treatment inhumane treatment because they were force-fed when they were refusing to eat.
And to say that
they didn't get their way.
Their experience of getting the vote is in any way comparable or worse than that of poor and minority men.
Yeah,
that's like, and they continue to maintain the lie that the vote was something that was oppressing women, that the entire historical context of the vote was evidence of women's oppression. When women didn't have to sacrifice to the state to get in line, and they were given every bit of latitude. And not just that, the final nail in the coffin is that white suffragettes use racism to get the vote.
Yep.
You know, it's just astounding that they continue, like feminists continue to engage in these gross acts of white feminism by alleging that the vote is evidence of women's oppression.
Elizabeth Cady Stanton said something along the lines of, if black men are given the vote before white women, what will become of our innocent white daughters? Right? You know, like,
exactly.
Once the black men get those rights, they're going to go raping. And Susan B. Anthony said something along the lines of, she said that, God, now I've lost it.
Well, anyway, she said things that white nationalists would love her for.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But I mean, when you look at the actual parliamentary debates on Hansard, which is the archive website for British parliamentary debates, when you look at the actual rhetoric around that they just celebrated 100 years, right, of the Representation of the People Act, which was when women were ushered into enfranchisement. But like, nobody celebrating this holiday, which was just like a year or two ago, 2018, I think. Nobody celebrating this really bothered to mention that 5 million British men were also enfranchised through that act, and that the primary slogan behind the public support for it and the parliamentary support for it was, if he's fit to fight, he's fit to vote, and that there are no barons and no peasants in a foxhole. There is pure equality between men in a foxhole. And so you essentially had this one incredible historical moment of World War I that completely obliterated public support for class distinctions, and how some people who had served in that foxhole were able to vote, and other people who had served in that foxhole or could be made to serve in another foxhole in the future would not be allowed to vote. And they just kind of tacked women on as an addendum. It was like, women over 35, yeah, you can have the vote. You know, and the reason that they limited it to women over 35 was because if they had made it age 21, like with men, women would have been a supermajority voting bloc. That's how many men had died in that war.
Yeah.
And they did not want to unbalance society in that way.
And to persist in pursuing a distortion of society that doesn't just erase the situation for poor men, but the situation for minority men as well, is like, it's like peak white feminism.
Oh yeah.
It's astounding. And the thing is that Susan B. Anthony said,
if black men get the vote before women get the vote, they will subject their women to a level of oppression that no white man has ever been able to inflict on his women.
Well, that's the usual narrative. You know, those men over there, they deserve what they get because they're misogynists.
Yeah, they're bad. They don't treat their women very well.
Yeah.
They treat their women really, really bad. They don't even think of their women as human.
We don't even consider the possibility that there's also a reciprocal relationship there. Because you look at the statistics for child abuse coming out of Middle East and other places that are, questionable, and they're horrendous for boys.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of abuse of boys in those areas. And, if there is this sense that these guys are violent or out of control, maybe some of it is the fact that they aren't treated very well when they're children.
Yeah. Well, it's like, it's Stefan Molyneux would say, that's the primary thing. I would say that there's a whole cluster of cause and effect going on, like a whole bunch of things. It's almost never down to just one variable, but yes. And even in Western societies, from the age of 9 months, caregivers, mostly female, start hitting boys more 2 to 3 times as often as they hit girls, right?
And so I just want to emphasize this. The entire argument around the franchise and the vote being oppression of women is peak white feminism.
Oh, yeah.
It requires completely denying the situation for Black, Hispanic, Asian, minority men, poor men, indigenous men who had to fight and die and sacrifice for their country before they were even considered for full citizenship rights, and also managed to convince the people in power to allow them to fight. So somehow women couldn't do that, even though women were able to get things passed like prohibition without the vote? I don't think so.
Even abolition.
Yeah. Yeah. So, it's like women obviously had political power, and significantly more political power than poor and minority men. And yet poor and minority men could convince the powers that be to let them fight in order to have the argument to give granted full citizenship privileges. But white women never could do that. I wonder why. I wonder how convenient it is. And then to frame standing behind a minority veteran when he gets his vote first because he's fought and died in his country as oppression is peak white feminism. And I just wanted to put that out. I want to repeat that because I wanted to drill it into people's heads, this argument, and how illegitimate it is on every single level. Okay, I'll rein in my passion.
Okay.
All right.
Let's move on.
Okay. I just wanted to say one more thing about that line. Men, especially white ones, they said, were the real victims in society. I think, aside from everything else that you guys have said, I also believe that this is a tactic against the audience that's reading the article, because I think that Laura Bates believes the idea that men could be victims because there is a presumption that even if you are if you're not a feminist, but you're just a blue-pilled normie, you're going to believe that men are not victims in society as a group. And so when she puts that out there, she's trying, in my mind, to demonstrate how ludicrous it is that boys would see themselves as victims. And she legitimately believes that it is a ludicrous position, and that's why she clearly and obviously misrepresents the original statement, which was probably something like boys can be victims. I mean, in particular, boys can be victims, not even men per se. But when she listens to what boys are saying, she reads it as, oh, you're saying men are the victims. And so I think that she's also making this statement a public statement and putting it on this website that gets a lot of traffic, specifically so that in her mind, normal people will see it and they'll just go, really? Yeah, because it sounds ridiculous. So
that's why I actually brought what I did.
Well, yeah, but it's also too, like when you look at it, we've been trained that white men are the most privileged.
Yeah.
And so, but like we've been trained that is really dangerous rhetoric.
Absolutely.
And I think that like you guys all heard that Trump banned critical race theory, right?
Yeah, from
he
federal.
funded it, didn't he?
He banned it from federal training, so it's from for government work specifically.
Yeah, so if you work for the federal government in the United States, you will not be getting training based on critical race theory.
Right. So
it will be totally defunded and gotten rid of. He calls it un-American. He calls it bigoted and racist. And it essentially casts a certain race of people as evil and racist based on their physical characteristics, and it has no place in the United States. And I think, honestly, I am quite pleased about that. I'm not sure. I'm not sure whether it's going to help or hurt his run for re-election.
Well,
but
let's look at it in this terms. It's probably going to make the people who promote this now feel entitled or completely justified in what they're doing. I mean, it's really difficult. This is like fighting a hydra. You cut off a head and 6 more appear.
Oh yeah, but what it might do is actually cause them to go so over the top, right? That they
expose their hatred.
Yeah.
Well, I think they've already.
I think they've already. Yeah, they've already shown their ass in public a billion fucking times by now. But it might actually get them to, because here's the thing, right? A lot of these normies, they watch CNN, they watch MSNBC, right, and they watch the fiery but mostly peaceful protests in in Kenosha, right? But what's happened, and I think that what the Democrats were depending on, because they didn't say anything, Biden and Harris did not say anything. Harris actually encouraged. She did not differentiate between the protests, the peaceful protests, and the rioters, right? But she said they're not going to stop, and they shouldn't stop. They should keep it up, blah, 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 early on, right? And this was about 2 weeks after the precinct in Minneapolis was burned to the ground, right? So we're talking things had already turned violent. The Target had already been looted and destroyed, right? The auto zone had already been burned to the ground, right? The precinct had already been burned to the ground. So we're talking, we know that what's going on is not just peaceful protests. It's peaceful protests plus, right? And she made no distinction between those two things. And then she said they're not going to stop, and they shouldn't stop. They won't stop before November 3rd, and they won't stop after November 3rd, and they shouldn't, right? So that's what she said early on. And then she didn't say anything else about it. Biden said nothing about the violence until Chris Cuomo and Don Lemon were sitting on CNN one night and commenting on Donald Trump's RNC acceptance speech, right? Except his official acceptance speech for being officially nominated as the candidate. And he called them out for not saying anything. And they were like, yeah, and it's kind of hitting them in the polls, right? The race is tightening, right? Trump's catching up on Biden in the polls. Biden's lost some points, and the focus groups are all saying it's because of the violence, right? So they're going to have to actually come out and say something. And within 24 hours, they both put out these tepid statements, right? About how, violence is always wrong. Black Lives Matter, woo, right? And so what we're seeing is what I think that they were banking on, right, is that they would never have to say anything, because eventually, like a toddler having a tantrum, they would tire themselves out, right? And the riots would peter out all on their own, and then they'd be far enough back in the collective memory that they'd never have to address it.
Yeah.
Okay. So they just waited and waited and waited and waited and waited and waited. And the reason why they didn't want to address it is because the moment they actually took any kind of real stance against it, right, then they're worried about AOC and all those radicals splitting off and forming another party.
Okay.
If that were to happen, right, before the election, that would guarantee, even if Biden won this time around, or if it happened after the election and Biden won and then he put a stop to all of this shit, right? which he won't, it would mean a splintering of the party, which guarantees 2024 onward for the foreseeable future a Republican president and Republican majorities in the House and the Senate.
Mm-hmm.
This realpolitik is really interesting, but it is not topical.
Okay.
Yeah, we're off topic.
Let's read some more.
Let's go back to the article. I was just making the point that I believe that
for the love of
this
God.
is a tactic. So.
Oh, it is. It is a tactic.
All right. The boy who told me he didn't believe my story of assault was not an isolated case. Gasp, how could he? From inner city London to rural Scotland, teenage boys, usually aged around 15, came out with the same arguments, word for word. Oh shit, red-pilled teenage boys. Or they'd repeat the same false statistics which claimed, for example, that men are raped far more frequently than women.
Yes, they are.
Well, they obviously are, yeah.
Like it just is flat out they are, because the community, and especially in the last year, there is no denying that in any year, any particular year, men are raped more than women, or they are raped as much in the community in any particular year, and we have multiple years of the Center of Disease Control statistics to prove this, and they are raped significantly more in prisons than women. Rape is a men's issue before it's a woman's issue. I'm going to say that again. Yeah. Rape is a men's issue before it's a women's issue. Men are by far the predominant victims of rape in any particular year, in any particular calendar year. And women have appropriated it for themselves. And in fact, interestingly enough, guess what group of men are the most likely to be victims of rape?
Black men.
Black men. So once again, white feminism has appropriated an issue from black men. Well, now, white men are also more likely to be raped than white women, but black men are by far the largest group, proportionately the largest group of rape victims every year in the United States, or even probably, I don't know if in the UK.
At the hands of both men and women.
At the hands of both men and women. So,
well, the ones where it was a woman who did it, they don't count.
Right.
Well, they count to us, and they should count to everybody else. And
I know.
Once again, what do we see again? Another peak white feminism talking point. By appropriating rape for women.
Yeah, they're a bunch of fucking Karens. Yeah.
They are denying the situation for black men. All men, of course, but in particular black men, because black men are the
not just black men, because when you look at, child sex abuse and child rape, there's all kinds of issues in the in indigenous communities. There's I agree. Kinds of dysfunction in indigenous community and in Arab communities,
they are taking an issue that predominantly affects minority men, but also white men, more than all women, and they're casting it as an issue for women.
Yeah.
This is peak white feminism.
Just go watch Tom Golden's video on, are girls sexually abused more often than boys? Are they really? And, they do find that more girls have been victims of child sexual abuse, but that when you actually get down to the most extreme forms of sexual abuse, boys outnumber girls. Like, girls are more likely to be victims of fondling and things like that. Boys are more likely to be victims of completed sexual intercourse.
Like sodomy.
Right.
Yeah. Or forced vaginal penetration. So there's more severe forms for boys. And also that statistic that boys are less likely to be overall, more likely to be more severely sexually victimized, but less likely to be less severely sexually victimized. That's not true of other cultures. Like around the world, there's incredibly high rates.
It might not even be true of our culture because
boys. Why would you even?
Well, you know what boys are like, right? They something weird happens and they just they've been told to shrug stuff like that off. So
yeah, because their bodies aren't. That we don't teach boys that their bodies are sacrosanct like we do girls.
That's right. So right. I mean,
we teach them that they're sort of public property in a way.
Yeah. So I mean, you look at it and it's like a lot of that. It's like that study Whittam and Morris that you cited in your that one really unbelievably excellent article that I still refer back to. Manufacturing female victimhood and erasing male victims, or something like that.
Yeah, manufacturing female victims, erasing male victims.
Yeah, and so essentially, of children with a documented history of child sexual abuse, when asked on a survey designed to capture victims as adults of child sexual abuse, 64% of the women who had that history disclosed that abuse, and only 16% of men did. Right? So
1/4, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, like, the 64% ain't great, but 16%?
It's terrible. It's like it, and for some reason, either men don't want to disclose, like it's so shameful that they don't even want to say it anonymously,
or they've talked themselves out of it,
or they've tried to make excuses that no, it wasn't really that thing, or maybe I wanted it.
Yeah.
Therefore, it wasn't abuse. Therefore, I was responsible for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just, but the fact remains that this is accurate.
Yeah.
In a year, men are, I think, twice as likely to be victims of sexual assault, sexual violence, and rape than women. And
I mean, there's like upwards of 250,000 adult male victims of prison rape every year.
Yeah.
And that's just counting the victims. That's not counting the number of instances, because a lot of these guys are raped over and over and over and
over.
A
lot of them are raped by female guards.
Yeah.
And the violence, like, the thing is that people will say, well, a lot of that's just coercive. Well, as if it really matters when you're dealing with someone with that much power over you. Mm-hmm. Like, there's very few situations of greater power than a guard over an inmate.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing is that there is a substantial portion of that is actually violent.
Mm-hmm.
So these women are violently raping the men. Well, and how can they fight back? It's a guard.
No. Yeah,
they can't.
You can't. No.
Literally, they cannot fight back. The instant they fight back, they're thrown into solitary.
Yeah, they
or get more years on their sentence.
Yeah, yeah. No, they can take so much away from you if you resist. That you're just not going to resist. So.
Yeah. So this is a huge portion of the rape in prison is being perpetrated by women, and of course, a huge portion of the rape in the community, like vast majority, 80%, is being perpetrated by women as well, and that's a substantial amount. So yeah, men are about two, maybe even 3 times more likely to be raped in a year than a woman. So this is a men's issue. This is firmly a men's issue. Now, I don't subscribe to the idea that men should be prioritized for treatment, or that there should be male, like the treatments should exclude women or anything like that. That's ridiculous. No. But I note that white feminism has taken an issue, rape, which is predominantly faced by Black men, proportionately, or Indigenous men, and also white men. I'm not going to deny that, but what's particularly egregious about this is that they say that they're all for advocating for minority men, and they take an issue that predominantly faces Black men and they turn it into a woman's issue. And also, incidentally, almost all of the resources go to wealthy women, white women on college campuses. Well, and women who are least likely to be raped.
Oh my God!
Advocacy groups and not for profits and stuff like that. Mm-hmm.
And nobody points this out. Nobody points that this isn't. Once again, there are a lot of peak white feminisms in the world, aren't there?
As a director, like I forget who it was, but one of my men's rights Edmonton buddies went and he actually did some digging, and he found out how many tens of millions of dollars a year get provided by the government for the Alberta network of women's shelters, right? Which is run by Jan Reimer, who used to be the mayor of Edmonton. But he found that the average salary of a director of a women's domestic violence shelter was something approaching $200,000.
Holy shit! Oh my God!
But they just don't have enough money to provide services for men.
They $200,000 a year,
approaching $200,000 a year. It was something
average.
like 185,000 average. Yeah,
that's like the average. I actually think that's like 80,000 more than the average CEO gets.
Well, my husband.
That's 80,000 more than the president gets.
He makes essentially on the button $100,000 a year, or he did before COVID and the 10% pay cut. But in order to, because that's better than a 100% pay cut, right? And what he's doing is highly skilled, highly technical work that very few people are actually capable of doing, that essentially control a segment of infrastructure that if it went down, right, would essentially put an entire province in the dark and maybe a couple of US states. Right? It's important stuff, right? And he made, before the COVID pay cut, he made $100,000 a year on the button.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
And this is just, well, you can see why they're grinning all the time, these feminists.
Oh yeah, no, they're always smiling. They always got that whole duper's delight thing going on.
Yeah, they're like conning everyone. And what's really hilarious is it's such incredible projection. Like like feminism is so much about casting things that actually affect minority and poor men and all men as women's issues, thus rendering. And I use black men because it's the most egregious thing, because they say that they advocate for them, rendering black male victims invisible.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
All right, moving on.
Hey guys, if you're a 15-year-old boy who's listening to this now, this extreme misogyny, you might want to consider fine-tuning your rhetoric for when you encounter Lori Penny or Lori Penny.
Laura Bates, Laura Penny, whatever.
Laura Bates, Lori
it's
Penny,
really freaky hard.
Clementine Ford.
Mona Alafawi.
Start pointing out that their feminist talking points are actually white feminism. This idea that white women women, they mean white women are raped more, hides the massive amount of rape that affects poor and minority men. And the fact that the franchise is somehow female victimhood, after what poor and minority men had to go through to get it, and they didn't. You might want to point out that this is all white feminism. Like almost all of their talking points are white feminism.
Okay. So she goes on to explain why it's ridiculous to say that men are raped far more frequently than women. She says, in parentheses, in reality, according to the Office for National Statistics, around 560,000 women experience sexual assault each year, compared with 140,000 men.
No.
And parentheses.
Okay, this is the bait and switch. This is like, we'll use the crime statistics when it's convenient for us, and we'll use community surveys when it's convenient for us, right? So when it comes to crime statistics for domestic violence, of course you're going to find, or rape, right? Of course you're going to find more women reporting that to the police, and therefore it's recorded in those crime statistics. But when it comes to, actually, and the only reason they're not using community statistics here, because the CDC found that 1.26.
Well, this is the UK, so this is the UK. So the statistics might be different in the UK. Maybe UK women are a little less rapey, or something, or there are less black men in the UK. Who knows?
It's generally about the same, right? But
there's probably some statistical chicanery going on, because it's actually difficult to parse this stuff out unless you read the methodology, you read how they asked the questions, and everything.
Or whether it's just based on reports to police.
Yeah.
Right?
Or how they're defining rape, whether or not men can be raped by women in their laws.
That's right. Technically in the UK, men can't be raped at all, period.
Right. So there you go.
Not even beyond.
That's why. But that's why it says women experience sexual assault. So they're not using rape; they're using sexual assault.
Oh yeah, well, and a lot of so Adam Jones tackled this in his beautiful paper. You should Google it. Called "The Globe and Males," not like the Globe and Mail,
right?
MAIL, like but MALES.
It's a pun.
Yes, it's a pun. Anyway, he essentially brought up this point that Statistics Canada came out with this survey and it was reported on, and the reporter said, women have reported. Women are twice as likely to be afraid of being assaulted in public, and rightly so, because they are now equally likely as men to be assaulted, right? Which is fucking retarded to begin with. Okay, you're twice as afraid with good reason because you're equally likely to be a victim of something, right? No. But when you actually drill down into the numbers, what they find is women will report being shoved on the subway, right? Or being yelled at, or having someone brandish their fist. Men generally only report from the emergency room.
Yeah.
That's when they call the police, when they're getting stitched up. Right? They don't generally report to the police because somebody got into a shoving match with them. My husband has, he's been assaulted numerous times, and the only time he ever reported it to the police was when he beat the shit out of the two people who were trying to jump him and steal his shit. And then he walked directly to the police station and reported it because he was worried that they were going to come after him. Like he was worried that they were he was like, I think that if these guys see me again, they're going to kill me. What can I do? And the cops were like, yeah, come back when they show up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, how far are we into this article?
Not that far.
To ask,
how much longer should we go? We can do this as a series. I mean, how about I read until the photo of the feminist actually comes up, and then I'll do the super chats and we'll wrap it up there.
Yeah, and please send through those super chats because they really help out.
I do have 5 already waiting, but I'll do those at the end. So.
Yes, they help support Badger Cave.
Yeah. Okay, so I started to ask how they knew women lie about rape. Because they're human fucking beings and sometimes they lie? What do you mean? Or that the gender pay gap is a feminist conspiracy. No, it's not. It's a feminist lie. Yeah. I mean, this is another thing that they do, this tactic where they say, oh, well, you think it's a conspiracy? Oh, look at how silly you are. Put on that tinfoil hat. What are you, triggered, snowflake? No, you're lying about data. That's all. That's not a conspiracy. It's just a lie. It's just a lie.
But they're con artists. This is what they're gonna do.
I know. They're gonna try and make you sound ridiculous for being skeptical of them.
None of the smart ones really believe anything that they're saying.
They're just enjoying the con.
They just pushes buttons.
Well, yeah, but you would have to know that you are lying if you know that you are on one hand making the claim that we live in a society that oppresses women. But that where men run everything and they oppress women to the benefit of themselves and at the expense of women, and nobody cares about women, but the way that you engage your activism is by pushing the let's give a shit about women button, and it works every single time. So you would have to know that people actually do care about women so much that they won't even question data that's presented to them to help them. So that you're involved in a con.
There's no way they don't know this.
And the mere act of questioning the data can be construed as misogyny. Extreme misogyny.
Extreme misogyny by tubular radical dudes. So
the only way is to push the you want to benefit women button, but the you want to benefit women button doesn't exist, but it always gets pushed every time the feminists ask. That's great. That's a great way of putting it, Brian.
Yeah, it's like you have to know that we care about women, otherwise you wouldn't be able to use women's victimhood to excess to help them. Like that, and then yet still say, but we live in a society that just hates women. It's like if we really lived in that society, then literally there would be no feminism. Like, it just wouldn't exist.
We wouldn't be talking about this article because
you know what?
It would be illegal. Like that. Like, she'd be in prison.
There would be a Latina and two white men talking about how women are hard done by.
Yeah.
On a channel called, I don't know.
Yes, in some, like, throttled, blacklisted, like, channel in the darkest corners of the internet where no one wants to go because they're afraid to be associated with them. Like, that's what would be happening.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Oh, but that's great. It's just that's so succinct, Brian.
Yeah.
You don't care about women, now care about women.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not like the others. I care about women. Let me donate. I'm different. No, you're not. You're doing what everyone's doing. You're falling for the con. All right, anyway. Moving on. So I started to ask how they knew women lie about rape, or that the gender pay gap is a feminist conspiracy. Where did they hear this? The answer is always the same. Online. When I asked some teenage boys to show me... Yes. When I asked some teenage boys to show me the online forums they frequented, things became clearer. They were interacting with an extremist, mainly online movement encompassing a number of groups and communities. From incels, involuntary celibates who believe attractive women should be punished for denying them sex, doubt it, to men's rights activists who argue that the world is stacked against men. So now we're getting to the meat of this. And this, is that her?
It is.
Oh yeah, that's Laura Bates right there.
Statistically, people don't want to benefit
Crazy
men.
eyes.
Like, seriously, they don't want to benefit. You look at the statistics, you ask people, and we now have those statistics. People don't want to benefit men.
No, like literally, if you have a charity to raise money for childhood cancer, or to allow poor kids to play soccer or whatever, okay, your face, the face of your charity, they're going to pick a girl over a boy almost every time. I mean, I think probably
nobody wants to benefit boys or men.
It's 7-1 girls to boys whose faces are on those posters. I was in a Tim Hortons. It's like, let's get the kids out playing soccer. You can donate to this, charity, get kids, active, blah, blah, blah. Right? There were several posters, and I did a count, like, because I was just there waiting for my food. I did a count. It was like 25-1, right? Girls to boys visible in the shot.
Nobody wants to benefit boys or men. In fact, we hate, as a society, I think most societies on the earth, we just consider what men, how men benefit different and how women benefit different. That's, each society has its own way that it thinks that it's benefiting women, and it's and making sure that men are paying for everything. But we, as a species, and definitely as a culture, we absolutely hate the idea that men get anything.
Yeah, no,
we despise it. The instant somebody thinks that, there might be men benefiting somehow unfairly, they are all over that and destroying it. And that's what feminists bank on.
Oh, yeah.
They are using that. They're using that fact that the average person absolutely the bile, the vomit rises in their throat the instant they think a man is getting anything that he hasn't earned. Even if he has earned it. Yeah. Maybe he earned a little too much than he deserves. They're like, we got to stamp that out. I mean, this is you talk about racism or homophobia or transphobia. In fact, all of those things are actual manifestations of this particular hatred that people have. The idea that men are getting something they didn't earn or they shouldn't get at the expense of women. Absolute. There is so much visceral hatred towards that concept and towards any man who is perceived to be getting something at the expense of women. It's just, and like I said, all of those other isms, they're actually expressions of that.
Well, you look at the exodus of black men from their families that started in the 1960s, or was it the early 70s, right?
And the exodus, I think, with the eviction.
Well, some of it was involuntary eviction, some of it was voluntary exodus, and the reason being that no American was willing to pay for an able-bodied, employable man to sit at home and do nothing, right? And so some men were kicked out by the mothers of their children, and other men voluntarily left because it was the best way that they could provide a paycheck to their children. The best way that they could support their children was to not be there, right? So because the moment, if they were there, there was no check, right? So, like you had this issue with men either being booted from or voluntarily leaving the family home and their children, because Americans, they were willing to pay for women and children to exist. They were not willing to pay for men to just exist. Absolutely 100% not. And like that's just exemplary of, and that's changed, right? But it only changed when it came to be realized that a single mother family structure is an unstable family structure, and that men, even if they weren't working, were playing a role within their families. They were actually contributing something to their families. They were actually making their wives' lives easier, right? And so, they gradually started to get included in family welfare benefits. But initially, it was you just could not convince Americans to pay to support men to sit at home.
And that's exactly what women, like feminists like this, they use. They use against us is our automatic revulsion towards the idea that men get benefit that at the expense of women. I mean, get benefit at all without earning it, but definitely at the expense of women. So the instant they start saying, oh, men have benefited somewhere, everybody freaks the fuck out and they start tearing down their hair and vomiting and screaming at each other and chimping out and throwing shit and saying, we got to end it. Because it's a trigger for every human being, the idea that men benefit at all, which is why, people like us are so ostracized. And it's not even that we're saying that men should benefit more than women, just that, we need to consider men's benefit, or we may end up with a society that doesn't work. Because you can't ignore the needs of half of it, especially the half that's responsible, the majority, the running of it, and the innovation in it, and the maintenance of it, and the creation of it. You can't ignore their needs indefinitely and expect it to work. Just like you can't drive a car for, 1,000,000 miles and never do a tune-up or clean the gas, or change the oil, or, put water in the radiator, or however that works, and expect it to still work.
Mm-hmm. That reminds me, my car's in really rough shape. I should probably take it in.
Our hatred of the idea, I actually wonder if that's what drives the fall and the rise and fall of civilizations. We just so hate the idea that men could be benefited at all that we just end up driving our civilization into the ground because we never do any kind of maintenance.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's I think we do have sort of an evolutionarily engineered tendency to neglect men, and only when we can see them. And this is one of the things too, is that when a man's contribution to society is and necessary, right, then we can give him the rewards, right, for that, right? So, respect and maybe a special form of status, and, as head of household and all of those things. We can give him those things, because he as an individual earns them. But once we insert the middleman of government and we're just going to tax, well, we'll tax everybody, but it's mostly men. And then we'll give that tax money to everybody. Okay, yeah, it's mostly women, right? Then that contribution that men are making to women's lives, women are just as dependent as they ever were on men. It's just nobody actually sees the transaction because the transaction's happening at the IRS, essentially. The transaction is happening between each other. It's between the man up in the cherry picker fixing the power lines and the woman sitting and enjoying the fact that when she flips a light switch, the lights actually come on, right? And so there's degrees of separation in between women and their dependence on men. It's not visible. It's not immediate. And so we feel free to just essentially drive men into the ground. We can neglect them. We can ignore them. We can, and then, when they decide that they're going to walk away, go their own way, we berate them as misogynists, and we say, what's wrong with these men? These men are awful. If they decide to stand up their fair share, their due, that we call them evil, nasty, disgusting MRAs who hate women and want to put them all back in the baby mills and the sandwich mines. And so, I mean, like, we're essentially, I think proximity, right, between the man and the person benefiting from his contribution, I think that's actually quite necessary in order for us to appreciate what men do. And we've destroyed that. We destroyed it with no-fault divorce. We destroyed it with welfare. We destroyed it with, social services, subsidized housing, subsidized daycare, all of those other things. We destroyed that proximity between a man and the people he's benefiting. And now we're just like, yeah, no, fuck them. They're obsolete. Yeah, maybe we'll, like Caitlin Moran said during her portion of the Monk debate, Canadian national debate across Canada, are men obsolete? Oh, yes, you're obsolete, but, we'll still keep you around. You're kind of like ice cream. You're nice to have.
And I think this
like how condescending.
Yeah, it is really condescending. You only exist as an entertainment for me.
Yeah,
and these are people that are allowed to speak in public.
It's a luxury. It's like having a soda stream instead of having to go buy fizzy water from the freaking grocery store, right?
I don't know if somebody like Dick Masterson got to that quite degree. Men are superior to women, but I wanted to bring up the Memorial Day tweet last year. Remember that for Koss?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was talking about. When we stop recognizing men's sacrifice, we start undermining the ability to take care of them, to recognize their needs. And when we stop being able to recognize their needs and take care of them, then we start to allow the civilization to break down.
Well, and like it's not just like, it's not just the recognition, when you the brave servicemen and women and blah blah blah. And yes, I think there is a place for like I gave kudos to the nurses who stepped up and volunteered, right, in the Korean War, and the women during World War II who stepped up and went into the munitions factories and all of that stuff, right? Great. That's awesome that you
we can do it.
That women would be willing to do stuff like that voluntarily, right? But when you have an army that is not necessarily a volunteer army, right? And then you draw an equivalence between the women who volunteered and the men who were forced, right? And then on top of that, the women who volunteered are outnumbered by like 100,000 times by the men who were forced. You're sort of looking at something that's a little bit different. And looking at
it needs to be recognized.
It does. It needs, and the unique contribution. That doesn't necessarily mean that there are no women who can get up in a cherry picker and fix power lines. There are some women who can do that. There's just not a whole lot of women who are willing to do it. You know,
and all the women who do it are masculine.
Yeah, 99.5% of the people who are willing to do that job are men, right?
And the other 0.01% of women they probably have a fairly masculinized hormonal profile.
They probably have fairly long ring fingers compared to their index fingers, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, even if you can't say, and maybe give a shout out to the masculine women, the men and the masculine women.
Yeah,
because we don't get a hell of a lot of praise. I'm not being bitchy.
We don't woman properly, right? We're supposed to get out there. Women are supposed to be invited and welcomed, and have a red carpet spread in front of us in order for us to be able to find our way around a freaking hammer and a box of nails, right?
Yeah.
We're supposed to be, this, like, hey, you can't just watch some YouTube videos and figure out how to change your own car battery, right? You have to actually be invited in with a welcoming environment, a gender neutral and gender sensitive welcoming environment to take a class to learn how to change your own car battery. Like, fuck off. Right?
Yeah, but the ultimate point I was trying to make, sorry to interrupt you, but I know that this, is that, if we don't recognize this unique sacrifices that men make for society, we start to create narratives in which they aren't entitled to what they need to continue to function. And when men stop functioning because they, a lot of society rests on their backs.
All the heavy lifting.
All of the heavy lifting in this era, definitely.
If you look at your computer screen, all the aesthetics were probably chosen by women, and all of the code was written by men.
Yeah. So, I mean, men do a predominant work of the heavy lifting in society. So it's like you have a car, you're running it into the ground, and then you create this narrative that it's misogyny to fix it.
Yeah.
And you're not going to.
The car sucks. The car sucks and it hates me, and fuck that car.
Yeah. You're not going to have a working car for very long.
Mm-hmm.
And it started with this idea that somehow the franchise was an oppression of women when it never was.
Oh, it started before that, but...
Yeah, it started before that, but that's one of the biggest ones. That's the one that they think there's their nuclear bomb, which it isn't. It's not only is it peak...
It's 100 fucking years ago. Jesus Christ.
Well, it's peak white woman or white feminism, but it's also the first, one of the first, one in a line where we start to ignore the sacrifices men make, and then we start to think that we don't actually have to take care of them because men just get from society, right? Men just benefit from society. They don't actually do anything to maintain society or defend society or build society or do the heavy lifting of society. Men are just a net drain on society. Isn't that right, guys? Everyone? Feminists? Yeah, everybody believes this. Men are just a net drain on society, and it's because we stop recognizing the sacrifices men make for society. And one of the big ones is Memorial Day. And when I started, I was just fine with maybe people recognizing the asymmetrical sacrifice of men. But now I'm thinking that Memorial Day, I would prefer that it remain completely male focused. You can have Veterans Day for both. But if you're going to memorialize the dead in war, it should be male.
Yes.
Okay. Should I?
Okay. Yeah, read the super chats.
All right.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll do more of this because we're gonna get in. It goes for a while longer, so we can do more of this another time.
It's more inane.
Oh my god! It goes.
She's got the wild eye, by the way. For those of you listening to the podcast, this woman really has crazy girlfriend vibes.
Yeah. She's got crazy
I see
eyes.
a lot of white.
There's a lot of white in her eyes.
Okay, like, and just to put it in context, I have like a little dog who's like very friendly and nice and cute and wonderful and snuggly and warm and adorable, and I never see the whites of his eyes. I have another dog who constantly tries to eat his head, and she's always showing the whites of her eyes.
Yeah, this woman looks a little bit like a little deranged.
Yeah.
She looks like it looks like this, you take away the dress, you take away the nice hair and the makeup. This looks like it could be a mugshot for
Babadook.
She's kind of
mugshot for a woman, adult woman, interested as a sexual minor.
Yeah, just your typical Antifa mugshot.
Or no, I'm actually thinking typical, teacher fondles student.
Oh yeah. Those teachers that
basketball court.
Yep, under the bleachers.
Yeah,
all right.
That kind of thing.
Molest child in the swimming pool. All right, so we'll do the super chats, and then maybe we'll do another Rantzerker to follow up later and do more of this article. I don't want to say the word "do" with Laura Bates, but all right. Mr. Roboto gives us $5 and says, "Alison, teachers should get graphic and gross. They need a PowerPoint presentation."
First, their sex lives.
Yeah, for their teaching of students on things on sexual matters. They should be less clinical and more gross. I actually probably could see that happening, to be honest. Meredith Glassberg gives us $5 and says, "Of you ask for the," I think that means if you ask for the stories of young men, you may get data that contradicts one's narrative. Yes, well, that's why she won't ask for the stories of young men. She'll just accuse them of not believing her when she obviously never lies. Tyler Preston gives us $5 and says, "Feminists always say, quote, it was caused by men/patriarchy, end quote, in regards of the draft, voting rights, etc. Reality causes their heads to go full scanners." Yeah. The Great Indoors 1979 gives us €5 and says, "Complimentary super chat because I don't have any witty non-dad joke to tell." Zaranx gives us $10 and says, "Murder, rape, burglary, kidnapping, failure to register for selective service are all felonies. Social Security is the only felony a woman can't commit because of circumstances of birth." Actually, right, SS. I assume that stands for Social Security and not, the Nazi group. Coran Strong gives us €5 and says, "Is it me or does Karen seem to brag how much her boyfriend is earning on a yearly basis every time she's featured on the show?"
Not every time.
Not every time. And that's all the super chats.
And it's not bragging either, right? It's not bragging because it's like
it's a statement
money,
of fact.
but
it's not an braggadocious way.
It's not bragging. It's a statement of fact in a particular context.
Yeah, like he earns half for what he does, right? Which is keep the lights on in like across the province and down into the United States, and he makes half what one of those stupid feminist cunts makes running a domestic violence shelter.
Let me clarify. Zaranx corrected me. SS stands for selective service. So selective service is the only felony a woman can't commit because of circumstances of birth. Yeah. I didn't put that together. Sorry. Okay.
Man.
What?
I
don't know. That's all the super chats. Do you have any thoughts? Stop trying to do that.
Stop trying to roll your R's, Alison. You don't know how to do it, and you'll never get it.
It's okay. It's okay. That's not bad. You're getting there. You're close. But you gotta. But it's not.
Just don't. Okay, so.
Oh my God.
Another story about my husband. There was this one time. Okay, when we were first dating and we weren't exclusive, and he went over to this chick's house, and she was like into S&M, right? And she had all kinds of paraphernalia and accoutrements hanging everywhere, and paddles and stuff. But they had a little session where like
accoutrements.
Yeah, props and.
No, I know. I just like it that you said that because it's got the word cooter in it. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's actually accoutrements.
But you said cooterments.
Anyway. Okay, yeah, all right. Maybe that was Freudian. Anyway, so he says, so I'm there, I'm like spanking her ass, right? I got her over my knee and I'm spanking her ass with my bare hand, right? And then she starts going, prr, prr, prr.
Wow.
And I was like immediately transported out of the sexual zone. And I was like, what the fuck did I just hear? And then he was like, so my dick went limp. I made my excuses and left. Because it seemed like she was just acting.
Oh, yeah. I could see it.
And I was... Oh, like, who has the presence of mind to go... Prr, 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 while they're being spanked? I mean, if you're really enjoying a spanking, you don't go... Prr, prr, you go like...
You usually say, ouch, ouch, stop, please, stop, ouch.
No, ow, oh, God, yeah, sure. But prr, prr. Like, you're not a cat.
Yeah. That pulled me right out of the immersion.
What are you gonna do? You gonna start like rubbing your fist on your nose and licking it?
There might be some who'd be into that, though. You know, like,
where the fuck am I? Right? And I'm like, oh my God, she really did that? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, oh, I'm so embarrassed for her.
Yeah, that's
I think she thought it would be sexy, and it's like, no, I was willing to suspend disbelief all along through this Harry Potter movie, but then when Tom Cruise landed, drop-lined out of a black helicopter and started machine gunning everybody, and an alien vessel came and abducted Harry and Hermione, I kind of lost the plot.
Yeah.
I'm just going to make sounds until this ends.
Okay.
Well, why don't you wrap it up, Allison?
Okay, all right. Well, I'm technically making sounds till it ends, even when I'm making words.
There you go.
Those sounds. Yeah.
But make words.
Okay, yeah, I'll make words. So if you would like to support this work, please go to feedthebadger.com/project/badger-media-blitz and put some shekels in the hat. Every bit helps. So $5. If you can only do $5, that's great. Like it's a big boon. And I would really want to make sure that I can, pay Brian and Hannah and possibly Prim or Mike this month. So feedthebadger.com/projects/badger-media-blitz. Back to you, Brian.
All right. So we're going to wrap this up, and we'll see you guys Friday for a show with Teal Deer. But if you like this video, please hit like, and I don't mean like what Laura Bates wrote, but rather our ramblings. If you like the ramblings going on. Yes, right. Yeah, exactly. If you like that for some reason, hit like, subscribe. If you're not already subscribed, hit the bell for notifications and leave us a comment regarding at least the degree to which we discussed this article. I did put a link to the full one in the description if you want to read it yourself. And when Laura Bates's book comes out, we might look into it. I have a feeling I'm not going to learn anything new from this book.
I'm not reading that shit. I am not going.
And we should purr when we find ourselves in it.
It's not.
Or just make Wookiee sounds.
Yeah, we could do that. Anyway, so yeah, leave us a comment. Let us know what you guys think about this. And thanks guys for coming on this episode of the Rantzerker, and we will see you in the next. It's been a while since we did a Rantzerker, hasn't it?
Yeah,
it has been. Yeah,
I haven't felt very feisty.
Yeah. Well,
2020 has been sort of draining.
This is, and for this, I am thankful to Laura Bates, because every so often you just need like a little bit of a nostalgic throwback crazy feminist to look back on and say, oh yeah, I remember you bitches. So
yeah, I remember when the world was sane.
And you were insane, and now you're insane, and the world's insane. And
yeah, no, it's like the last year, like 2020, it takes a lot of energy just to watch what's going on, let alone to comment on it. So, but
yeah,
I find this is so too. But I could make sounds again.
No, we're going now. Go. All right, thanks guys for coming on. We'll talk to you guys in the next video.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.